Special thanks to Raycon for sponsoring today's video. Alright, once again we are back with another edition of our Klub Outside Q&A Roundup series. And as always, Kubo takes and answers a variety of questions directly from fans over on his personal Q&A platform, and then we try to dissect those answers right here on the channel and see if there's anything of value to be found among them. Now, a lot of the time, Kubo's comments are a mix of light-hearted chatter and fluff, but sometimes we are given real, genuine insight into the story and world of Bleach that for whatever reason wasn't found in the original material. And as always, I'm not going to be looking at every single answer he's ever given, nor even necessarily looking at them in any kind of a chronological order. Instead, I'm mostly trying to curate the answers that I find to be interesting, and to have the most value to then bring to you. And so, speaking of which, this time the questions revolve around the topic of Shinji Shikai, Urahara's potential new role in the Gotei 13 of the Hell Arc, the living standards in Muken, and more. As always, a huge thank you goes out to M Shadows for providing the translations to the questions and answers, and as always, there is a link in the description to where you too can find them, so make sure to go and check them out. Right, on with the latest roundup. We'll begin with the topic of Shinji Shikai, as I think there's probably going to be the most to talk about there, and it is quite a fun one. Before we get started on the video, guys, however, as always, consider supporting the channel either by hitting subscribe if you haven't done already, giving the video a like or a hype. No matter what you do, it all does help enormously, so thank you all very, very much. And consider checking out my other channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games, as well. Maybe give us a subscribe over there too, if you like what you see. And before we get started on this video's topics, first a word from today's sponsor. If you're in the market for a Christmas gift idea, then take a look at these. They're the Raycon Essential Open Earbuds, and I use them every day. Right now, they're up to 20% off for the holidays too, so they're more affordable than ever. The coolest thing about these earbuds is right there in the name, the open ear design. For someone like me who spends all day editing videos, it's essential that I'm able to hear my audio, but at the same time I want to be able to listen to music too. Thanks to the way these simply sit over your ear, due to the multi-angular hook, I'm able to enjoy the best of both worlds, listening to music while still able to hear my video audio clearly. And with 8 hours of play and 36 hours of battery charge while using the case, these are keeping me going during those especially long edits. And these benefits ring true for everyday wear as well. If you're out and about, you can stay alert around traffic or remain part of a conversation while continuing to listen to your music. Plus, they don't fall out of your ear, so you're not going to lose them on a walk. The essential open earbuds are here for the holiday season, and as Raycon audio products are currently up to 20% off, they are selling fast. Just click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/MrTomoOpen and order by December the 15th to guarantee delivery by Christmas and support the channel at the same time. A big thank you to Raycon for sponsoring today's video. So here we are talking about Shinji once again. The current captain of the 5th Division feels like another of these characters who benefits a lot from Klub Outside, and Kubo tends to use these answers to dive deeper into Shinji's combat capabilities and overall strength, as though trying to make up for the way the character was ultimately treated in the manga. And the same is true this time around as well. And actually, this is quite an interesting question, and it receives a surprising answer, and one that serves to, at least in my opinion, make Shinji potentially considerably stronger than he was before. So, Shinji's Zanpakuto is Sakanade, and upon releasing its Shikai, Shinji transports his opponents to the inverted world, where everything is reversed. Up and down, back to front, even side to side, and the angle from which someone swings their sword. Later, Shinji further improves on his Shikai's ability by learning to speak in reverse as well. Sadly though, despite being a very powerful Zanpakuto on paper, Sakanade hasn't had the greatest showing in the manga, with the Shikai being effectively completely shut down in its 2 major appearances to date. Against Aizen, Shinji successfully uses his Shikai to land the first real hit on the villain, but once realizing how Sakanade works, Aizen he kind of just defeats Shinji in a single hit, merely a few pages after Shinji begins using his Shikai's power, all the while telling him that Sakanade is mere child's play compared to his Kyoku Suigetsu, and he's right, of course. But still, that always felt like a bit of a cheap win to me. Then, against Bambietta in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, Shinji Shikai does manage to successfully confuse the Stern Ritter greatly, and in the anime he even manages to outwit her, and seemingly have her on the ropes. But in the end, Bambietta's ability of the Explode is just a horrible matchup for Shinji's more focused-in power, and she just obliterates the entire area around her without prejudice. In the end, it doesn't matter if she doesn't know which way is which when she can just annihilate everything in her vicinity. There are a couple of other examples of Sakanade being used as well, and apparently successfully too, such as when Shinji somehow uses his Shikai to rescue himself and Omaida from Basby's Burner Finger 3, but, well, it happens off screen, and was totally cut from the anime. So, while Sakanade never really gets a chance to truly help Shinji win a fight, it is fairly clear, I would say, that it's a strong Zanpakuto. However, there is one unusual aspect of the Shikai that's shared between these two main examples that I just described. When the Shikai is activated, both Aizen and Bambietta seem to fall under its spell as a peculiar smoke entrances them. Kubo makes sure to emphasize the smoke in each of these instances, and during the Zanpakuto's introductory sequence, Shinji seems to both reveal and revel in the secret. As Aizen notes that nothing has changed before him, Shinji tells him the power is already in effect, before asking Aizen if something smells good. Aizen is suddenly shocked by this, clearly realizing that he can in fact smell something all of a sudden, but Shinji declares it to be too late. By smelling this sweet scent, Aizen has fallen under Sakanade's spell. The same is true against Bambietta, though Shinji doesn't go to such lengths to spell it out this time, but she too succumbs to its effects as a smoke appears in front of her face. Yet it's interesting. We all assumed, as I think was clearly the idea, that in order for Sakanade to work on a victim, they had to smell this scent. However, in today's first question, that no longer seems to be the case. A reader asked Kubo the following question, which reads, "We know that the trigger of Hirako's Sakanade is smell, but does it also work on people who can't smell, such as those who might have a cold? Does it also work on machines like BG9, who wouldn't even have a concept of smelling?" This is a great question, and again, as we can see, this reader also believed that Sakanade was triggered by smell too, because, like I said, that's very clearly how it's being framed in the manga. I also appreciate the BG9 shout-out as well. Anyway, Kubo replied with the following, saying, "It does. Smell is not the trigger condition, it's just that you feel a smell after getting caught in Sakanade's effect. Also, even though you didn't ask, BG9's shrift is..." Oh wait, he didn't say that last part. Never mind. Anyway, that's very interesting, and like I said, seems to make Sakanade considerably more powerful than we even first thought. This feels a little bit like the Gin situation to me, where he tricked both the reader and the characters around him in regards to the true nature of his bankai Kamishini no Yari in a kind of meta way, an unreliable narrator kind of way, though it's slightly different here, because Shinji never outright states that smelling the scent is the trigger for the inverted world to activate. He's not lying about anything per se, like Gin was, because the smell clearly is there, it does actually happen, it just isn't the trigger for them being affected by its power. I guess, in a sense, them smelling the scent, as Kubo notes, confirms that they have been caught in Sakanade's effect. But I'd argue it is heavily implied, to the point where it seems like that's what Kubo originally intended for the Shikai. I mean, hell, Shinji actually says to Aizen, as you can see on this panel, "It's too late to stop your breath now." While that's maybe not an explicit confirmation that smelling the scent is the trigger, it definitely feels to me like that is what Kubo was originally implying. Again, he can kind of get himself out of this situation because Shinji never actually explicitly says that smelling the scent is what gets Aizen under Sakanade's spell. But I mean, that line in particular is definitely a bit of a troublesome one, because it does seem to imply that if Aizen had held his breath prior to the scent reaching him, he may not have been affected. But it's such a funny situation because there's no way to prove that whatsoever. So if Kubo says now that smell isn't the trigger, it is just the result, essentially, then it's not the trigger. There's nothing to contradict that. But anyway, this does seem to make Sakanade potentially quite a bit more dangerous, in my opinion, as its sensory weakness, or limitation, if you can call it that, has been completely removed. Even Aizen's Kyokusuigetsu doesn't work on someone who can't see. Though I suppose the same is still true of Sakanade, depending on what the actual trigger is. Because Sakanade presumably affects all 5 senses in a similar, albeit smaller scale way to Kyokusuigetsu, I would assume that a blind fighter could still feel disoriented. Where Kyokusuigetsu needs the eyes to work, if Sakanade can indeed affect a blind person, perhaps they would still hear and feel things in reverse. Their other senses would still work fine, so they might hear someone attacking them from the right-hand side, but in reality they are attacking them from the left. And again, the same goes for feel as well, for touch. They might sense someone attempting to cut them from the left-hand side, but in reality it's actually coming from the right. Obviously that's complete conjecture on my part. And that brings into focus the biggest question I have remaining. If smell isn't the trigger for Sakanade, what is? Is there a trigger at all? If there's no trigger for Sakanade's Shikai, its power, then yeah, this is a totally busted ability that would work on seemingly everyone, including the blind. Because if there's no trigger, then they don't need to see the Zanpakuto release for it to work or anything like that, it will just work on them. But I'd be really surprised if that were the case. Could the trigger be the same as Kyokusuigetsu's? That the victim simply needs to see the Shikai release? But that can't be the case though, as Bambietta doesn't see Sakanade's release. Shinji is already using Shikai by the time he arrives on the battlefield. So maybe the trigger is the victim essentially being hypnotized by the sword, by the way Shinji spins it around. He spins it in front of Aizen, and he kind of swings it back and forth in front of Bambietta too. I have to wonder, does the smell play any role at all? I guess, like we mentioned earlier, the smell isn't the trigger, it's the confirmation. If you can smell it, it confirms that you have been placed under Sakanade's spell successfully. But I mean, it's kind of pointless really, because I feel like Shinji, unless the person opposite him actually says, oh wow, something smells strange, Shinji's not going to know either way that the spell's worked, I guess. That seems kind of weird to me. I mean, it feels like Shinji knows that the spell has worked anyway, because Bambietta doesn't mention any kind of a smell, in the manga at least. So yeah, kind of weird. Now it kind of seems like outside of some kind of narrative confirmation, the smell has no point to it whatsoever. And say Shinji did use his Shikai against BG9, and it's kind of cool as well that Kubo confirms that BG9 can't smell. Say Shinji did use Sakanade there, presumably, based on this, BG9 would experience the inverted world, but just wouldn't smell the scent, right? So the scent would be totally pointless, because, I mean, Shinji's not going to know either way. And, as in the case of Bambietta, Shinji's going to know it worked, because even though she doesn't mention a smell, she starts to lose her balance, and it looks pretty obvious what's going on. The same would probably apply to BG9 as well. I'm overthinking it, but still, I feel like the smell is now pointless. And what does this mean for how Shinji distinguishes between friend and foe when using his Shikai? To be fair, even when we thought the smell was the trigger, I wasn't sure how Shinji got away with activating Sakanade with so many allies around, and somehow Aizen was the only one to smell anything. You know, surely Sakanade's scent would have been picked up on the wind. But I guess now we know how it works. In fact, this news might be good news for how Sakanade works in that regard. No one else would have smelt it because no one else was under the spell. If the trigger is in fact watching the sword spin, then it makes sense why only Aizen was affected in the end. Anyway, that's really about it for this answer. Like I said, it's a cool one, but actually discussing it with you has made me realise that whether or not this is a straightforward buff for Shinji or not isn't so clear-cut after all. Basically, it depends entirely on what the new trigger for Sakanade is, or if there even is one at all. If there isn't, then yeah, I'd say the Zanpakuto is unequivocally more powerful as a result. Moving on, one of my biggest disappointments with the way the manga ended was the complete disappearance of half the cast, including extremely important characters. And I guess spoilers for the end of the Thousand Year Blood War arc coming up here too. But once Kisuke manages to kill Askin in chapter 666, the unshackled power of Askin's Gift Ball Deluxe severely poisons Kisuke, Grimmjow, and Jûreichi, to the point where Kisuke's bankai involuntarily disengages, meaning he's close to death, as it collapses around him and he doubles over, spitting up blood. And in the end, he collapses to the ground before the scene changes to Gerard's fight. And then we literally never see him again. The very last shot we get of Kisuke Urahara in the Bleach manga is him falling face first into a puddle of his own blood. Which isn't ideal. Not only do we never see him again before the series ends in 20 chapters after that, but we never even hear about him again, even in the epilogue. It was an enormous disservice to one of Bleach's most popular and most iconic characters, not to mention Jûreichi and Grimmjow too. As far as we were concerned, the Bleach manga ended with all three of these characters' fates just being left up in the air in a kind of Schrodinger's situation. Sure, we knew that Nell was going back for them, and that yes, they likely made it out okay, but to not even hear from them really stung back in the day, and I would be amazed if the anime doesn't change that next year. However, with the arrival of the Hell chapter in 2021, this was fixed somewhat, as Renji mentions Urahara to Ichigo, telling him that Kisuke has been working with the Gotei 13 again since the war, so hey, at least we know for sure that Kisuke made it out alive, and presumably so too did the others. Yes, they're alive and well in Can't Fear Your Own World, of course, and even play major roles in that story. But for me, it would simply never have been the same without actually seeing or hearing about their fates in the manga itself, so I am grateful we did. Anyway, in a recent question on Klub Outside, Kubo went into a bit more detail regarding Kisuke's new role in the Hell arc, with the reader asking him the following question. By the time of the Hell arc, it's said that Urahara Kisuke had become the advisor for the Research and Development Institute. Was Mayuri not mad about it? To which Kubo replied, "It's not actually said that he is an advisor, but I guess you could consider him an external advisor or such. Mayuri is of course fuming about it, and he's even actively trying to interfere with his work. However, he doesn't meddle with products that have already been finalised." While unsurprising, this idea that Mayuri hates and disapproves of Kisuke's newfangled products is brought up in the Hell chapter too, as Rukia tells Ichigo that they've now got TV in the Soul Society, and based on the way she talks about Ichigo and Orahime's marriage, is clearly enjoying some daytime TV during her free time. Renji explains to Ichigo that after the war, Kisuke began working closely with the R&D Institute, and together they've been developing a bunch of new reishi devices, presumably including the new Soul Pager that Renji is calling Ichigo on, as Rukia is surprised that it can video call, and also has absolutely no idea how it works, which I thought was a really nice detail. Mayuri himself shows up just as Ichigo compliments Kisuke on the phone and remarks that Kisuke doesn't understand the Soul Society's aesthetic, while he is always trying his best to tailor his products to fit the tone. Though Renji and Rukia complain that Mayuri's bug design for his holographic projector is disgusting. And later, as Mayuri beams his hologram to all the barracks, Rangiku wonders if Kisuke developing all of these new products has got Mayuri sweating, to which Mayuri replies that he's simply testing a prototype that just so happens to be of superior technology to anything Kisuke can produce. So it's clear that Kisuke is, rightly so, closer than ever with the Seirete and the Gotei 13 in the time since his banishment, and seems to be actively working with them on a near constant basis. I am surprised the Soul Society didn't have some form of TV beforehand, to be honest, considering the research and development department has been working with, monitors and advanced communications technology for a while now, but I suppose the general masses are always the last to get it. In a way, it definitely feels like Kisuke is perhaps trying to quietly undermine his former protege and expand his influence among the Gotei 13 by introducing all of this new technology that he's likely getting inspiration from via the human world, but it's really cool to see all the same. Considering, in many ways, the Thousand Year Blood War arc really was the coming together of Kisuke and Mayuri again, and featured Kisuke really interacting with the Gotei 13 on a ground floor level, once more for the first time since, well, I guess the Lost Agent arc actually, but on a grand scale for the first time since Turn Back the Pendulum. This is awesome, and I hope, if the Hell arc does happen, that Kisuke is seen working closely with the Gotei 13 again. It's true though, Kisuke isn't actually mentioned officially as an advisor in the chapter, so this does appear to still be an off-the-books position, and that's presumably because Mayuri would never allow him to rejoin. Also, I guess if Kisuke did officially rejoin, that wouldn't really make any sense because he would technically just be the boss again, whereas obviously Mayuri isn't going to allow that to happen, so the current arrangement seems to make perfect sense. I love the idea that Mayuri is actively trying to sabotage Kisuke's work as well, as he absolutely would be that petty. I guess what I'm most confused about, though, is, who is approving delivery of these products? Who is signing off on the Gotei 13 getting TV and smartphones? Mayuri is, as we just mentioned, the boss of the Research and Development Institute, after all, so why doesn't he just shut down Kisuke's involvement? How are these products reaching the Gotei 13 if Mayuri is so against it? Unless Kisuke is going over Mayuri's head to someone like Kyoraku, but again, he's apparently working closely with the Institute, so maybe someone like Akon is simply sidestepping Mayuri to make these advancements happen. Perhaps this is meant to be further evidence of Mayuri having mellowed out, especially after the war, and he's kind of just letting it happen, and maybe even helping out a little bit while also trying to be a nuisance at the same time. That's the picture he's trying to paint. I mean, to be fair, Kubo did say that Mayuri doesn't meddle with products that have been finalized, so, again, how does that work? Mayuri would presumably have to sign off on these products, right? So he just messes with the products during the research and development stages, maybe in the hopes they won't pan out, but once everyone comes to an agreement, he just lets it slide. Maybe he really has changed to become a more altruistic person after all. Either way, I love to see this, and to get more information on Kisuke's newest role in the story. Knowing that he's back working with the institute he founded is very encouraging indeed, especially after all the work he put in during the war. I also can't help but think that if Mayuri can put his grudge aside at least a bit, which clearly he is doing, or else Kisuke's products wouldn't now be flooding the market, this could be actually a very, very powerful iteration of the Gotei 13 indeed, with the two of them working essentially together. Okay, up next, just a couple of smaller topics to round out this episode of the Klub Outside Q&A Roundup series. First, Kubo was asked the following question, which reads, is there a connection between how both Soul Reapers and Quincy's live in Karakura, and how Karakura is a Jûreichi? I'm thinking that when people with a certain level of Reiatsu gather in where a Jûreichi has been formed, that's when the town becomes a Jûreichi. To which he replied, yeah, but you have things backwards, and it's that things with high Reiatsu are drawn to the Jûreichi that's already been developed. While it's interesting to get a little more information on the concept of the Jûreichi, as it's only really introduced in the moment to give Aizen a reason for wanting to destroy Karakura Town specifically, unfortunately this particular piece of information is actually given to us in the manga. So it's a bit of a waste of a question. In chapter 223, Yamamoto describes what a Jûreichi is. That is, it's a spiritually charged area in the world of the living that draws spirits in. As you can see, he already told us there that the Jûreichi itself draws spirits to it, not the other way around. As the reader theorizes that the high concentration of spiritually aware beings transforms an area into a Jûreichi, which would have been interesting too, to be fair. No, in actuality, these people are perhaps being subconsciously drawn to Karakura Town. What's interesting then is that Karakura Town itself is way more important than maybe we first realized. Yamamoto notes that the location of the Jûreichi changes over time. But if Kisuke chose Karakura to escape to over 100 years ago, then maybe the Jûreichi takes a very long time to change locations. Presumably, this is the same reason as to why the Ishida family lived here as well during Everything But the Rain. I have to wonder if these spiritually aware characters have any inclination that they're being drawn to Karakura Town kind of en masse or not, and are there more than one Jûreichi operating at any one time, whether that's just in Japan or across the world. I guess it's probably easiest to assume that no, there is only the one at any one time, which allows all of the focus to be placed on Karakura Town. I guess the only remaining question is, how does a Jûreichi form then in the first place? And finally, I know we normally strive to end these episodes with a lighter topic, but actually I thought this one was fairly interesting. A reader asked Kubo the following question. What kind of meals are provided to the criminals locked away in the Muken? Also, since Aizen's mouth is strapped up, do they remove his binding when he eats? To which Kubo replied, no meals are provided. The individuals who are imprisoned there are criminals that cannot be killed. So, on the one hand, this is fairly obvious. We know, thanks to an admittedly pretty throwaway line by Mayuri in the manga, that Muken is full of essentially immortal criminals, which was interesting in itself. Originally, we thought that Aizen was simply being locked away down there due to it being the lowermost level of the prison, but no, in actuality it's specifically due to his immortality, and he's surrounded by other similarly unkillable villains. And I guess I'm not surprised that the Gotei 13 doesn't see fit to treat these people with any kind of dignity whatsoever. I mean, Aizen is literally strapped to a crucifix-like slab all day, every day. The last thing they're going to be doing is bringing him food. However, one thing that I do find kind of interesting is Kubo's wording here. Muken is full of criminals that cannot be killed. Saying someone cannot be killed isn't the same as saying they can't die. Who's to say the criminals down there won't just die of starvation or of old age? Just because the Hogyoku protects Aizen from fatal injury doesn't mean he's impervious to a natural death necessarily. And the same goes for the other prisoners down there too. While immortal would mean they can't die, cannot be killed is a very interesting phrase to use. And of course Aizen has been called immortal before in the series, but cannot be killed just indicates to me that Central 46 can't execute these people, so they have no choice but to lock them away forever instead. However, them not needing to eat or drink at all would imply that they are quite literally immortal via means unknown. Not just from injury, but from everything. Are they all like this? How did they get this way? Does this mean the Hogyoku prevents Aizen from requiring any basic needs at all? Honestly, a really cool, perhaps shorter arc would have been some kind of Muken breakout arc where a few of these unkillable villains managed to escape. Still though, I think this is a pretty neat piece of lore all the same. Alright, but that's it for our latest edition of the Klub Outside Q&A Roundup series. As always, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you took something of value away from it as well. Let me know down in the comments below which of the topics you found to be the most interesting this time. Is it the discussion on Shinji's Shikai, his Zanpakuto Sakanade, and the fact that it's maybe more powerful than we first thought thanks to Kubo revealing the truth about its trigger or lack thereof? Maybe it's the discussion regarding Urahara's new role among the Gotei 13 in the Hell arc, or something else entirely. Do let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Alright everyone, as always, thank you so very much for watching. Consider hitting subscribe if you haven't done already. Check out my other channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games as well. Your support is greatly appreciated over there. And as always, an enormous thank you and a massive shout out goes out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon, without who I simply wouldn't be able to do this. So thank you all so very much for the continued support over there as well. That really does mean so very much. And again, if you want to support the channel that extra step further, you can also join the Patreon as well to get your name in the credits, just like everyone who is a Patreon member. And you can also get the videos totally free of YouTube ads. Alright guys, until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.